So there's a couple of things I wasn't expecting to suck about being an ecologist, or wasn't quite, hadn't realised the scale of what I'd be faced with. Certainly the hours in the car have been quite hard to deal with. I didn't drive that much because I was an academic, so I could just walk into the lab. So I went from doing no driving at all really to going into 3,000 miles a month basically, and then that was quite a new experience. I wasn't very confident on the road, but I feel like I've overcome that now, and I've just had so much experience now that I feel a much more confident driver. The timings have also been a bit difficult to deal with. Obviously, these surveys that we do for bats are at dusk and dawn, and I'm definitely, if you talk to anyone who's known me over the last couple of years, I am not a morning person. So getting up at 2 a.m. to drive to a site for 3 to then spend a couple of hours surveying for bats was certainly a bit of an unexpected experience. I mean, I knew there'd be some of it, but I didn't realise quite how much I'd be doing. But I think I've started to enjoy them. It's really beautiful to drive back early in the morning and see the kind of foxes out on the roads and beautiful sunsets. So those often make up for it. But I do think people at Arvtech have started to learn not to try and be too chipper with me while I'm sitting with my coffee in a deck chair watching the bats come out. I definitely think they've experienced that I'm a bit crotchety sometimes. And then finally, one thing I totally didn't expect was that lofts are incredibly hot sometimes. So you're off taking photos in your loft and you have to spend up an hour in there surveying, looking for bat poo, that kind of thing. And I come down drenched in sweat, which then when I'm supposed to talk to a client and explain to them the kind of difficulties of the next steps of bats or what they need to do, I think maybe it undermines my professional presentation a bit to be plastered in sweat. So maybe I need to come up with some solution for that. So the first major kind of career progression milestone I've had is that I was accredited as an agent onto Chris Formaggio, our senior ecologist's license. And that means I'm able to go off and do these licensed bat checks, so like the PRAs, the preliminary roost assessments. So I've started to get stuck in on that, and that's quite nice because you can do those during the day, so it's kind of a nice break from doing all my dusk and dawn surveys. So my sleep schedule is normalised a bit now, which is much more pleasant. So I've had quite a few interesting experiences doing that. Found my first bat roost the other day of kind of an entrenched bat colony, which was a really cool experience. But there's been a few traumas and unexpected experiences or difficult moments, because obviously I've now started operating on my own rather than trailing someone more senior. So clients often can be a bit frustrated, I think, at the bat process, because I think that a lot of the bureaucracy can be quite unexpected, and people are just submitting their planning application for a re-roofing or something, and then suddenly an ecologist turns up and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, because you've got bats, you now need to pay us money to come and do bat checks." So often that can be quite unexpected, and I think people can get upset there. So, I've had a few clients that I've had to explain the importance of bats to and why they're legally protected, and that can be, its own challenge and a bit of difficult diplomacy. But I think one of the major challenges was I turned up at a house and I realised that they actually already done the building work. So even though it was pitched to me as that they were doing an upcoming survey, I turned up and I realised that actually a vast amount of roofing work had been done, and actually several bat colonies had probably been destroyed. And what was great there is I was able to flag it up to the rest of the company, and theoretically the job was just supposed to be for me, but I quickly realised that I was out of my depth and I didn't have the experience level I needed. And there was a great kind of gathering of our senior ecologists to give me advice. And Natalie Evans, one of our other ecologists, came onto site with me and helped me work out what our kind of legal responsibilities were and how we could manage this situation on site, build a plan for the client to mitigate the damage that had been done, and what steps the client then needed to be taken. So I felt I was able to very quickly, when I was in a bad situation and out of my depth, quickly access skills and expertise from more senior members of the company. And she was particularly amazing. So that was I used our Cheersmate system to try and express my gratitude for that. And I think that's how you actually get good at a job and how you get a career, is not just continuing having positive experiences. It's when you find the negative experiences and the difficult situations, and you learn how to deal with those. So hopefully next time I encounter a situation like that, I'll know exactly what to do and be able to carry it through myself. In the last few months, I've now started taking on clients solo and basically driving an entire project from completion, from the first survey of the kind of preliminary roost assessment to then recommending dawn and dusk surveys, leading those and having subcontractors kind of that I'm managing, and then producing the final report and taking the client through to the next stages if necessary. And this has been a kind of brand new challenge for me. It's not something I was used to from academia. Like, I've never had to be client facing in that way before. So I've had to work on my kind of diplomacy and kind of talking to a client and explain to them clearly what's actually going to happen and what the next stages are. And I felt I've developed quite a lot from that, and it's been brand new experiences. The first couple of surveys I did of those kind, I was quite nervous. I realised, I'd once turned up to a site and I hadn't brought the right equipment that I needed to check the temperature or take the right photos. So I had to come back a few hours later with the equipment and say, oh, I'm so sorry, but, I'm just going to take a few more photos now. But I think I was quite lucky in that most of my first clients were very friendly. They're very good. I think I ran into a bit of a pitfall, which is that because I've got my PhD, so I've got a doctorate, so I happily put doctor in front of my name on my company emails. And I think that led clients to decide that they were obviously talking to someone very competent and professional, which may not be the word to describe me in my first couple of weeks with the company. So I remember talking to a client and explaining that because she wanted an ecosystem services statement, which isn't something I'd done before, and it wasn't something I felt equipped to do yet. So I said, I'll pass you to my senior colleague Craig, who will do that for you. And she was saying, there's senior colleagues to you, who's more senior than a doctor? So I then had to explain, it's a doctorate in clinical medicine, it's not in ecology. And I think, there was some kind of expectation clashes there. But I think now, I may temporarily take that down from my profile for a couple of weeks until I've upskilled. But I now feel like I actually know enough that I can take a client through the entire process without telling them any egregious lies or misleading them through my own ignorance, which for me I think is a big step. The benefit I've probably used the most at the moment is the Audible subscription. I already had an Audible subscription before I joined the company, but now I've swapped it over to the company's one. And that's been really great because you do spend a huge amount of time driving. I think in particular for me, because I'm just starting the job, so I've been going around to meet other people in the company who are based in different areas of the country. So I've been doing kind of 3,000 miles a month. And that's a lot of time sat in my car, not being particularly productive. So an Audible subscription has meant I've been getting lots of audiobooks, and I've been able to kind of entertain myself in the car and also start working on some of the kind of more interesting, more technical books, some ecology texts, some philosophy or business practices books. I'm listening to Nudge at the moment, which is really good, kind of decision-making psychology. And I've just been chewing through 1 or 2 books a week, and that's been really good. I think it's made me feel that I'm kind of using that time productively. Arvtech has really exceeded my expectations with their attitude to continue professional development. I think that's where, they were so on board with me saying, I've still got this master's I'm doing online. I need to set aside some survey time to go off and get in the field and survey some solar farms that I'm putting together for a project. And I was quite nervous approaching Rob with that. I thought he'd be like, you didn't mention this at your job interview. I was expecting you to be full-time. You can't have 2 days a month to do this. But instead, he was really good about it, very positive about the project, very enthusiastic, and absolutely no problem getting that done. And similarly, I decided quite early on in my work here that I've been based in Devon for the last couple of months because of the pandemic, but actually I'd like to move to Oxford and live and work there. And Rob instantly said, we totally happy for people to move, really happy if you can locate there and if there's work there. And I thought that was really positive. Again, it was a conversation I was a bit nervous going into, wasn't sure what his response would be, but the company's been really, really flexible with how I'm approaching that and really happy to work with me there. So I think the biggest learning curve for me at the moment has been botany knowledge. So eventually I want to be doing kind of phase 1 habitat surveys for sites. But I think plants has never been something I've been very excited about. I've been much more interested in animals and animal behaviour. So I can recognise bat species very easily. And at the end of the day, there's only 17 bat species in England, so you can actually just you can learn the list and you can get to know them all individually. Whereas obviously there's thousands and thousands of plants, and I just don't have naturally that kind of knowledge coming to me. So it's something I want to work on, but certainly in my kind of professional development courses and my masters that I'm doing, I've found gaining that knowledge and kind of learning about the plants quite challenging. So hopefully, if we do anything like this again in a year's time, I'll just proudly say that I've mastered all this and I can happily identify all these plants. But at the moment, it's something I'm definitely aware is a kind of gap in my professional knowledge, and it's a gap that I'm struggling at the moment to bridge. So I think I just need to put more time into it and kind of carve out that time and work on it. So I think some of the biggest lessons I've learned so far are always kind of being cheerful and respectful of your colleagues, because they've been so helpful to me. I'm used to, historically in academia, I'm used to driving a project by myself, not really having to talk to other stakeholders, not having to talk to clients, which I'd never really experienced before. So I've worked a lot more on my kind of diplomacy and my kind of liaising with the client. And that's certainly been a learning curve, and it's something I think I've now got down a lot better. And the other thing, Rob talks about this a lot in his internal documents in the company, is the kind of Pareto principle, the idea that often 20% of the work is worth the other 80%. And he thinks that admin is that 20%, and that actually staying on top of your admin is much more important than anything else, because that's how you're impacting on other people in the company. And I've seen that very much in practice. I had a few weeks where I got very keen on the surveys. I signed up to all the surveys in the day, so I was out on site all day, and therefore I wasn't actually doing my admin. I didn't have any time at the desk to sort that stuff. And then that almost clogged me up for a whole week after that, because I'd kind of got out of sync with everything, and I'd, almost missed some surveys. I thankfully made them, but, it was a near-run thing. And I realised the truth in his statement that actually, you have to be on top of your admin, and everything else comes into place there. You can't cut corners on that. So going forward, hopefully I'll avoid that mistake again. So my main goal at the moment is to get my stage 1 bat license. So I need to get about 100 more hours of that, and then get signed off by 2 ecologists. I'd love to do a bit more work with other species, so I've mentioned dormice and great crested newts a few times, and then I can start thinking about kind of the road towards maybe becoming a senior ecologist, getting accredited by CAM. So I think there's quite a lot. And so it's nice to be in a career where I've got lots of goals at least.